Sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Sure. The agenda item under old business is benchmark senior living, just for the recording. And no new financial assistance is being sought. This is a request for a transfer and change in ownership to a new entity that is controlled by a joint venture that is in part minority controlled by the old owner. What's important that the manager and the operator entities of the property would remain unchanged. And for a little bit more detail, I think this is a good time to hand it over to applicant.
Good afternoon, I'm Don Gordon from Jelly Vegan Toronto. I have here with me Desiree Craniac Baker from Benchmark. We also have Jake Quigley with us as well from Benchmark. As Andrew said, this is a transfer. It's being structured as an asset sale, so the owner will change. But essentially, it's really the equity investor who's changing, and the manager and operator, Benchmark Senior Living, will stay the same. It'll continue to operate the same. There'll be no, discernible difference to any of the residents. We're not asking for any additional financial assistance, just to maintain the same pilot, which goes through the end of 2027.
And
Up for
questions for the board? Okay, seeing none. Greg or Sandra? Questions? Okay. Great, what is the pleasure of the board? There are
motion to approve.
Yes. Second. Second by Josh. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, that's Parts Mountain.
Great. Yes, Parts Mountain introduced the Spagnoli road site. This is a resolution making certain environmental findings and determinations with respect to a change in the project and reaffirming the prior inducement resolution. Melissa Bennett is here today and will present a bit of a summary, as is Jay Radigan from Parts Mountain to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kelly. As the board may recall, back in 2022, you approved you adopted an approving resolution for this project, and at that time it was one building, and so since then the company has come back with a request that Jay can elaborate on to change the project from one building to two buildings. And so as part of your approval process, you have to make SECR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act findings with respect to your project. And so given the change from one building to two buildings, the project's back before you for you to make that determination, given that you have previously made the determination for one building. So the resolution is making that determination, and then would be ratifying the prior approving resolution. And I can turn it over to Jay to elaborate on the changes themselves.
Thanks, Melissa, for describing the technical aspects that I didn't quite get myself at first, but the board may remember, and thank you all for your time. The board may remember about 3 years ago, this was approved, the original inducement was approved for incentives for a single warehouse building on the property at Spagnoli Road, previously undeveloped site that National Grid had owned. And we had also gone through, roughly simultaneous to that, the process of getting all of our local approvals, site plan, zoning board process. The zoning board, in terms of SECR, was the lead agency. Is that the proper terminology? I think it was the lead agency, and so that the zoning board made the determinations, I guess, that needed to be made with respect to SECR and the environmental findings that were required by state law. Before we went out to market, once we got all our approvals on this Spagnoli site, and before we went out to market, Obviously, the market was, the industrial market very much in flux, not just in this region, but really throughout the country as we were coming out of the COVID pandemic, 2020. So this was approved, I believe, in 2021. And about that time, 2022, really, we had completed the building at 235 Pine Lawn, which this board also had approved for incentives. And the larger of the two buildings, the address of which is 235 Pine Lawn, we did have some difficulties due to the market changes in leasing that to a single user. So we've subdivided that space. We recognized at that time that the market was shifting and turning towards smaller users. So with respect to the Pine Lawn property, in any event, we have subdivided that. Virtually all of that building, the larger building, has been leased. We did actually exceed the job creation requirements for that building. There's about 48,000 square feet still unleased, but we're confident that that will be leased. So that building, it's fairly large, over 600,000 square feet. There are 4 tenants, either in space operating now or in 2 instances getting ready to move in. And so we see the market now in a way that really favors and is most active for smaller tenants. And thus the change on this site at Spagnoli from 1 large building to 2 smaller buildings with a rough aggregate reduction in square footage of about 40,000 square feet. So we went, just using rough numbers, from about 400,000 square feet to about 360, a little less than 360,000 square feet. We started, I would say, in the spring of last year, 2023, going through the process with the local boards, the zoning board and the planning board, to get that approved. We have been going through that process now for about 1.5 years. We have 1 hearing now scheduled for December 4th with the zoning board that should wrap up all the approvals we need for that modification. Again, from 1 large to 2 smaller buildings to meet market demands, respective tenant demands. I would say about 1 year or so ago, I think it was with Ms. Murphy's predecessor, actually was still here at the time, we had reached out to start asking, what would be involved, because we were thinking we need to change this project. So there have, even though the formal written request for this was made only this summer, we have had discussions about this going back over 1 year at this point with agency representatives. We met about a month ago. Ms. Murphy was there with representatives of the Trades Council, and well, that was a productive meeting as well. I believe Mr. Average was here at the last meeting. So just to summarize, I guess this is a technical secret type requirement. And we ask that the board approve this based on what we perceive to be, and I should add, by the way, there's been a lot of development of industrial space in this region, Suffolk County in particular, in the last few years. So it is much more competitive. And we feel, to meet the market demands of tenants that are out there, these 2 smaller buildings would be required. I will note also that the tenants that we do have, the 4 tenants that we have, 235 Pine Lawn, every one of them was motivated, at least in part, by the incentives that are available for that building. I believe Ms. Murphy met with a couple of those tenants, at least over the course of our leasing marketing efforts. So it was very important for us and for those tenants that those incentives existed, and we'd like the opportunity to take what our incentives already approved for this site and just convert them through the secret process to the incentives for 2 buildings. By the way, the numbers, other than a slight reduction in the total square footage, the job creation numbers that we're projecting haven't changed. So we still project 250 jobs. A few more zeros would be nice, but not on a size, the property this size. So 250 jobs are still projected. We're not asking for any more money, not asking for any more incentives and more dollars out of the public's pocket here. The costs inherent to this project, or as projected anyway, at this point, I went up a little bit, even though the square footage went down, mostly because of labor costs increasing, material costs increasing, and in some cases, the duplication now of mechanical systems, for example, that would be required for two buildings instead of one. But it's a very minor increase in the total construction cost, total project cost. So for those reasons, we would ask that the board approve this measure. And I can answer any questions you may have.
Yep, Jim, you mentioned the building was about 40,000 square feet. I got 473,000 square feet less. From your original approval of 411,000 square feet.
The
Proposal of 338.
numbers I have in front of me now are 396 and 357. I don't have the entire file with me, but it is an aggregate reduction in the total square footage. I think
I was going off of your letter that.
Yes.
yeah, so the letter says that, and then I got a budget that we sent over to Ms. Murphy. I don't know if it was circulated with the
I
budget
did.
comparison. I'm sorry?
I did, so.
Okay. Yeah, so you're right with respect to what my letter says. Is different. I can tell you that the approval we got from the planning board was for the 411,000 square feet from the planning board and zoning board. So the budget we have that we presented, one of my colleagues prepared this last week. It does illustrate, or it does contemplate a smaller building, and I'm not sure why that is.
No questions.
I have just a couple too. You said that, going back to the Pine Lawn job, you currently have 4 tenants in there and there's currently some vacant space.
Yes.
With the 4 tenants, you said that you've exceeded the job creation that was designated for that. You have some new numbers off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I know our newest tenant, for which you just signed the lease, was 45. And I think we were pretty close to 250 to begin with the 3 tenants that were previously signed. So I think we're well over 250 at this point. I couldn't tell you more precise numbers though.
Okay, and so you've exceeded the job creation with the existing tenants. There's room for more job creation on that building?
Absolutely.
Also, you said that you've talked to Nassau Suffolk Building Trades with Marietta, said you've had a conversation.
That's correct.
Is there a conversation directly between your field personnel that are gonna do construction? I know you're in the office, but is there gonna be conversation moving forward with regard to, you know, the field personnel you have on site and Matty, who's field personnel representing, you know, building trades and other contractors that the building trades represent? So
Yes, and thank you, Brad. That's a good question. The answer is yes. In fact, the head of our construction department was also at this meeting. I should have mentioned that. So he and Matty had an open dialogue. His name is Sal Gentile. And what was agreed between Sal and Matty, which is what we agreed to frankly on the Pine Lawn project, is when we're ready to go out for bid on anything, you will know, you know, we'll get a direct line of communication, or we'll have a direct line of communication with Matty. If there are bids that come from his constituents that are close, but maybe not where they need to be, there'll be an open dialogue. We thought and I hope Matty agreed, it was a fruitful conversation.
it's my understanding, from information I have, is that there has been some use of the Nassau Suffolk Building Trades on the Pine Lawn job.
Oh, yes. That's true.
And is the design of the buildings gonna be similar to what you did at Pine Lawn with regard to, I think there was an issue regarding out-of-state steel and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, that is part of the conversation we had with Mr. Harrich. Some of the out-of-state steel on Pine Lawn that was manufactured, you have to get that out of state, and part of that contract was that the installation would be done by out-of-state workers. I know we said to Mr. Average here, we'll see what kind of workarounds we can manage for that. And talk to him. Once we order the steel, he'll be part of that conversation as well.
Yeah,
So
because,
I'm sure there are local workers who can install that and work with that. We don't necessarily have to bid it as a package.
because it sounds like now there's more versus the first time around, at least there's more of a direct relationship.
Yes,
I would hope that to be the case, so
Yes.
that, as I think we've expressed to you, we give tax incentives for local, for local building projects that we would like to encourage the Long Island First policy, of course, as much as possible.
yeah, and I'll add too, by the way, that when this project was first approved by this board, the Spagnoli project, it was a time at which your Long Island First policy was in flux and it was changing. And although we got our application in before the actual change in the policy, we did agree to comply with the new policy. So that continues. We will be complying with the new policy, which is a little more, I guess, aggressive maybe than the prior policy, which governed the pipeline job, because that predated the change.
If I'm mistaken, the field personnel, you said Sal, what was his name again?
Sal Gentile is the head of construction. We'll have different people in the field, but they all work for Sal.
He was also in charge of the pilot project.
That's correct.
Ryan?
I just had a question. I think it's for our council, but I'm not sure. So we're making a determination in this vote with regard to SCIDA and the change in the buildings. How can we do that if we don't know how big the other two buildings are going to be?
Well, the two new buildings are going to be in the aggregate 357,000 square feet.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. when you were
No,
speaking.
the number of the approved building, it was.
We approved 411.
Right.
The letter says 338, but it's 357.
No, sorry, the letter that I wrote says 411, which was what was approved.
Right.
The budget that one of my colleagues prepared and was sent over last week to Ms. Murphy, and I had to use it, I was away last week, so it's
Yeah.
prepared without my input or supervision, says 396,000 square feet. I don't know where that number came from.
Okay, but your letter from July 17th says 338.
338 for the new buildings. And and the budget says 357. Yeah, that's fair. It's a good, and I don't know the differential, the reason for the differential on that. The designs I've seen are for 338,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, I'm still not.
Yeah, I heard three numbers here. We all agreed 411,000 square feet was the original approval.
That's correct.
The letter says 338. Then I heard two numbers. I thought I heard 396,000. And then I just heard 356,000.
Yeah, so the 396 was the original project, apparently it's reflected on this budget. For the new buildings, when we had made this formal request in July, I identified the new buildings to measure 338,000 square feet in the aggregate, which I believe to be the correct number. The budget that a colleague prepared last week in my absence says 357,000 square feet for the two buildings. I don't know where that's come from. I could easily make a phone call if the board wanted me to get an answer to that. I just don't know offhand what the answer is.
So Jay, you provided the secret determination that was undertaken by the zoning board of approval
That's-
back last fall.
That's
Are there
correct.
any changes to the square footage from what you submitted?
No, that would be consistent with what is on the board.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And so in that instance, that's what was provided to the board and reviewed. And, the resolution itself says approximately, but so long as there were no changes from what the zoning board of appeals
Which is 338,000.
reviewed, then it sounds like it was an error. If the board would like, we could certainly wait for Jay to call his colleague and confirm.
It's 73,000 square feet less.
That is correct. That would be the correct.
Last question, you mentioned your December date with the municipality, your final approval.
Yes.
If you achieve those approvals, When are you guys looking to break ground? Because again, this project's been around for a while.
Yeah, very, very quickly. So being very candid, our, plan from the start, when this was approved both by this board, but also the local boards, was to start construction once the 235 Pine Lawn building was up and stabilized. So we're at that point now.
Are you gonna
So
bring both buildings up at the same time? Are you gonna build one building and then the other?
we will probably do certain structural elements of both buildings simultaneously, and we'll go to market immediately to try to lease both buildings, and we would build one. And then as that gets leased, we would build the other, finish the other.
How do we do that? Is that two pilots then, or is that, how does that work?
Well, the lawyers can probably better answer that, but our aggregate projection for job creations for both buildings, 250,000, or I said that again, 250 jobs. So, I expect it would be treated as one project collectively.
So in this instance, unlike Pine Lawn, where there were two different real estate holding companies and two different tax map parcels, here there's one owner for the project and one tax map parcel, so the pilot would be built. Just one, one set of documents and everything would be tied to the full location, which would include both of them.
Yeah, questions. Right again. So yeah, I just want to go back to the former project real quick, and again, just to make it clear on the record. When you first came before the board and in your original application, you testified and signed that, this particular project wasn't going to be able to go forward and be successful without, financial assistance from the agency. Subsequently, we know that as you secured a tenant for the one building, they didn't want to commit to the job, commitment that you had made. So the pilot was, eliminated. That building, I assume, continues to have that tenant paying full property taxes and is still operating?
I think you're asking about the smaller of the two buildings that was constructed on the Newsday site, former Newsday site. The address of that is 90. Yes, that's correct. That tenant is still operating at that location.
So could you just explain how do you reconcile, at one point coming here and saying that without the assistance, the project won't be successful. But now the project, is shown to be successful without, agency assistance.
Well, I can say that was a different time, different project. And that was a tenant who was willing to move into the space without the benefits of a tax abatement, which is not the case with the tenants that moved into the larger of the two buildings. Those are tenants that were attracted to the building by the tax abatement. I think we all know that tenant at 90 Ruin is Amazon, and they were willing to absorb the additional costs attendant to that space.
So there was actually a report done, and you had mentioned that, this particular sector on Long Island is very competitive now. There's been a tremendous amount of space built out over the last few years now. I think upwards of millions of square feet across Long Island. Typically, we provide assistance when, there's concern that something's going to be attracted to maybe another area. We want to retain existing jobs, et cetera. I mean, the report that Brookhaven Town did a few years ago, there was concerns about saturation with this type of warehousing. It's very clear that developers and property owners are jumping over themselves to build this type of warehousing because of the demand. And again, looking back, to your former project where there's a building that's surviving without tax assistance. I just personally feel that these types of facilities, could be built and with the demand filled without assistance where, we can pay full property taxes to the benefit of Suffolk County taxpayers and still see that job realization. So I don't know if you could just comment on what I see.
Well, again, I spoke to the Amazon situation at 90 Ruin, and I will repeat what I said, that the larger of the two buildings, the 235 Pine Lawn was frankly a bit of a challenge to lease up. And in the course of marketing that, we came to realize that the tax abatements that the board granted were very important to those tenants. So there were tenants that moved into the region that previously had not been in Suffolk County, and they were attracted by the tax abatement. We expect that to, we expect to see that repeated at Spagnolia.
Kelly, do we know, I mean, is there a way to do some sort of a search as to all the space that's been built out and to determine, how much of that space received tax assistance, across all the IDAs and what hasn't? I think it would be important to kind of know that as we look at these types of projects.
I would need to speak to all the other IDAs. It's a rather large undertaking, obviously, and I think, I don't know, you're grimacing over there. Do you have any thoughts about it?
That's a Herculean effort to reach out to every IDA and have them hopefully compile all that information and then get it back to, can it be done? Yes. Can it be done without moving 3 mountains?
I mean, I personally know of some that have been built recently without assistance. So I think it's something to start looking at.
Yeah, it's just,
And I know that Brookhaven Report, I think, looked at the entire region, so they were.
I don't know if it was in that granular detail that you're asking. I mean, wouldn't even know if the other IDAs, if you call Babylon, I think they look at you in the phone and say, So it's just, it can be done, but it sounds like a
And I
9-month
think the
project.
county would have to be involved too, because we have to know the buildings that aren't included in IDAs, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Last question, you mentioned, the Long Island First policy and your willingness to comply. In the past, you made comments and testified to the board, that, you felt as long as whatever monies you were investing, were provided to a local general contractor, that then general contractor could go ahead and spend that money however they saw fit with subcontractors, materials, workforce, and that you felt like you were going to be still in compliance with that policy. Is that still your position, that would be acceptable?
The board has a new policy, so I don't know that the comparison to the final one project is apt, but my understanding is that, I don't have it in front of me, but that the new policy is a stricter requirement with respect to using local subcontractors. So we would expect our general contractor to comply with that. We would certainly provide copies of that being part of our contract with the general contractor. And our intent is whichever local general contractor we use, to make sure that while we don't like to interfere with their bid process, that they know the significance of the need to comply with that policy.
And if I could, just to point out, and with regards to the change in the policies, the most important thing to note is that there's a notification requirement.
Right,
which we've talked about, so that you've got to supply notification to us of all the bids, when they go out, when they're due, and we post that on our website, so.
and we'll let Maddie average know directly as well, so that's
Exactly,
all.
so just to.
And if local businesses and vendors aren't going to use any speed
Adjust
notification.
Yep, absolutely,
Comply with all
yep.
Do you happen to know, have you selected a general contractor?
that. No, we've done, and that's why even these budget numbers are, they're not set in stone literally, because we haven't gone to bid on any of the materials. These are all projections. So we have not even communicated with any prospective general contractors on the job. We expect if this gets approved by the zoning board in 2 weeks, that will start our process.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, just a couple of comments. Parts, a Pineland Road project was your first project on Long Island, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, having been in the construction industry for 45 years before I retired, and having worked with a number of developers, I know obviously it starts off with that first job, and then hopefully over a series of jobs, you continue to build trust. And obviously, you're going to a second project now, and there may be a third or a fourth. So there were bumps in the road, obviously, with the Pine One project, and hopefully we got over them. So I would like to see moving forward that the building trades continue to have that dialogue with you, maybe develop more of a relationship with regard to what you want and what they can provide. And then, of course, obviously, hopefully after Spagnoli Road, you come see us again for another project down the road. And we build the trust that starts moving forward as you become a player on Long Island. So I'd like to see that happen and continue to strive to make that a reality.
Yeah, thank you. So would we, and I know right out of the box on the Pine Lawn project, before we ever even applied to the IDA or anything, I understand there was a contractor we used that, like, right out of the box, we stepped on our toes, not understanding what the requirements of this board might be. That was probably the biggest roadblock or problem in that respect. And what we've agreed to with the trade council is, as I said, more communication about the nature of bids. So if you're coming up, you're 10% too high, well, maybe 10% would go with it anyway, but if 30% too high, see what you can do. That's something we started at the tail end of Pine Lawn, but something we're committed to do from the outset on this project.
Other questions or comments?
Aaron, I was just gonna say, I did not vote in support of this last time, and my reasons at the time, if I remember correctly, were that I think this project will be built, and my concern is that with this particular applicant, the project, we rely on the expertise of people who supply to us and apply to us, and this project keeps changing. And in that sense, that doesn't give me confidence. So I don't, my vote was no previously. It's going to remain no for that reason. So I just wanted to say that.
Great. So any other comments, questions, concerns? We're just gonna wait 1 second. I think there was a connectivity issue.
No, he had a hard stop.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, I'm just checking.
Yeah.
Yeah, he lost Greg. Do we still have Sandra?
Yeah, she's on.
Can Sandra come back on screen?
She needs to come back on this one.
Sandra, can you just come back on screen?
Looking at the bridge. Looking at the bridge?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know she lives somewhere else too.
Can't hear you.
I'm back. I'm sorry.
Nope.
I don't know what happened.
Okay, all right, so we're ready,
We're
to
ready,
move on.
to consider a motion by the board. Is there a motion that someone would like to offer regarding this application? Okay, there is a motion to approve made by Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kevin. Should we do a roll call vote? Or all those in favor? Aye. Any no?
Opposed.
Okay.
So we have
Oh.
4-2. Approved.
So the motion.
Thank you.
And thank you all for your consideration
Thank you.
and, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Next up, do we have reporting out on the governance committee?
Greg.
So in the absence of the chair, or executive director and council, how do we handle the reporting out of the governance?
Is there a vice chair of the governance?
There are members present.
Right, the elected members can appoint a temporary chair to report out. Big.
I'd love to get there.
Brian,
Brian,
you want to be chair for 5 minutes? Chair pro tem. It's cute.
The governance committee met to consider the new solar, let me get the right wording, updated. The updated, right, where's the title? The updated qualifying solar and renewable energy projects policy for the IDA, as written in the documents here that passed out. And the committee recommended unanimously to refer to the, for approval to the full board.
Thank you. So comments or questions on this? I want to thank Kelly as well as Joe for their work on this over the past several months and really taking the initiative that's been spearheaded by the county executive in his Solar Up program and taking it and moving the ball forward with the IDA. So thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. And if I could, while we're speaking about it, I just want to, for the board members that were able to join us on November 18th for the event, where we sponsored and partnered with LIBDC. The county executive was the keynote speaker, and we presented a program for Solar Up Suffolk. It was well attended. We had close to 100 people. So I want to thank Barry Kerrigan for his assistance and all of the council for their input with regards to the policy. And especially Joe, who's worked tirelessly on this project for months and months now. So it's been a bit of a challenge, and we will continue to work together with LIPA and with PSC&G and with Scott Maskin, who we also appreciate his support throughout, to continue to work to make these programs more affordable for our businesses. So while we are a small part of that, we certainly hope that we can get the utilities and the state and others to work together with us. And we will continue to spearhead that along with the county executive. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? It is approved. Next up is the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
You have
noes
an
or-
extension from me, Sarah. I wasn't there.
Okay, thank you, Sandra.
You're welcome.
Minutes are approved. Kelly, other Other business.
Other business. So today I wanted to report, and the board has requested that when an event of recapture has occurred with the agency, that the staff report to you on that. Lori and I have kind of been heading up this initiative for the last, I would say 12 months, Lori. So we're looking at not only recapture, but terminations. So obviously, at the end of a pilot life, there's a natural termination that needs to occur. And the agency council has been tremendous to work with on this because we've kind of looked at our overall portfolio to make sure that everybody is positioned correctly. So in 2023, we had a total of 15 recaptures and terminations. 8 of those were recaptures, 7 were natural terminations at the end of their pilot life. We recaptured almost $2.4 million and redistributed that money back to the taxing jurisdictions with regards to the property tax amounts. We haven't finished our calculations yet with regards to sales tax and mortgage reporting tax. So we're still working on that aspect. But we did want to present our preliminary findings, and we should have our plan is to have the sales tax and the mortgage recording tax figured out by the end of this year. And we also have new systems in place to make this a little bit more streamlined moving forward. I would probably want to start reporting on a quarterly basis next year. I know, Josh, you had asked for this quite some time ago. So we did feel like it was important. And I will note that of the 8 US nonwovens, 105 and 110 MJ are included in that as pending. My anticipation is that that occurs this year. But all of the other ones are complete.
What was the dollar?
The exact dollar amount is $2,389,958.
That's recaptured money.
Yes.
Kelly, most recaptures are, or the tenant, the client, or whoever we induce, they say, hey, this is happening, and they write the check.
That's true.
That's why we don't hear about them, because the document says if this happens, you do X, and they do X, and it happens. But the ones that come before the board are where there's a difference of opinion about what's going to happen at the end.
Very good point. Very good point. So, and it hasn't been since post-COVID that this has been as much of an issue. You'll know, because prior to that, I mean, we never had anybody come back and say, we don't want to pay you, that sort of thing. But post-COVID is really when we started to see people say, hey, can we talk about this? And as they started to come to us, we said, it's really as staff, our responsibility to present them to the board and let them bring their case to you. So that's why it has changed, but I'm thankful that you brought that up.
So the number of non-end of life terminations is kind of at a high.
Yes.
Is there, from a staff?
And Trophy Depot is included in that. I'm sorry. I promise never to say that.
No, I'd love to have those guys.
We just, that one took so long that it kind of occurred within this year. So I'm sorry to interrupt. You were saying?
I'm sorry, I don't like that topic. I don't know what I was going to say. I was an effective filibuster.
I didn't mean it.
I know.
No, I appreciate you putting it together. I mean, I think it is critical that, the public knows that these things do happen. Certainly, we want all of our projects to be successful and then not have to, see recapture. But, just in my personal life, professional life, there's many times where folks are talking about the idea and it's just like, this never happens. And no, actually, it does. And we're, we hold people accountable, and it's important that the public knows that, we do that when someone's not, complying and committing to their jobs. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kelly, I remember.
Great.
Even if you say Trophy Depot again, I won't forget. So we have non-natural terminations for whatever reason. I would be interested in trying to understand
the common threads, right? So we have people who decided to sell their business, or people that decided to relocate, or people that couldn't meet the job. Like, oh, so those underlying reasons, I think, would be important for us to understand. Because if, for example, I'm making this up, we have one type of termination that is consistent, or we see a lot. The next time we see an applicant for that same sort of project,
Yeah.
or same type of thing, we may want to ask some additional questions like, hey, we're happy to help you, but the people before you have not done well.
Right.
So how are you going to be different?
I will say the common denominator here in 2023 is COVID and changed business. Some of them downsized and relocated and stayed in business. Some of them went out of business. One of them, and Lori asked me to, reminded me that is EcoClean, who came before this board, who has not paid us, has gone out of business and is bankrupt, and we're not in a position to recover that money.
Did he threaten to countersue?
No,
We did not do.
no. He sold the business and there was nothing for us to do. After making a number of promises.
Is it one industry? I mean, you don't have to do it now, but later on, like, is it an industry? Is it a length of pilot? Is it a number of jobs? Like, is there any sort of common thread?
No, I don't think
I
there's.
think it's COVID. I really do. I mean, the common denominator was.
Jobs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
There is one or two, obviously, sales of business, but it's a lot of jobs.
yeah, or acquisition like L3, they were acquired by a large entity and they just,
No, I guess
so that's one thing we do see. And it's a good point that you bring up, is acquisitions. So aside from COVID, acquisitions would be the other, that we see, and just not wanting to comply with. That.
Well, putting together this information is very helpful.
Great.
So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. Last is just a reminder that the next meeting is December 12th and it is at 10:30 a.m. We'll have an event after at noon. And I wanted to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and thank the council again for all that they do for us and their participation in these extracurricular projects. So we appreciate it. So.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. Motion to adjourn? Is there a motion?
a motion. Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are
Aye. Happy holidays.
great.
So,